Hello and welcome into another episode of Lessons in Product Management. I'm your host, John Fontenot, and today we're going to talk about prioritization. Specifically, we're going to talk about why frameworks don't always get things right and how they might be a little short-sighted, right? I really think that there is a missing ingredient that isn't talked about nearly enough when it comes to prioritization. So we're going to get there. We're going to talk about an example from my recent work history of having to make tough choices in my day job. And we're also going to give an example from the NFL. So if you like football, you like sports analogies, or you like tangible examples, we're going to give you one. Okay. So starting from the top, what is actually truly missing from prioritization decisions? And I truly believe it all comes down to opportunity cost. Why do I believe that? Well, as product people, we can literally pursue any opportunities that we want, but how do we make decisions, right? Like, how do we make trade-offs? Well, it starts with objectives and strategy, right? And I've shared this on other videos, I've shared this in other podcasts, but I have a strategy framework that I like to use. It's pretty basic. You take OKRs, objectives and key results, and you put those as like the buns on the burger or the bookends, so to speak. And then in the middle, you put Richard Romelt's strategy kernel. So you have objectives, you have the challenge that's in the way of your objective, the guiding policy that's going to constrain how you make decisions to overcome that objective or overcome that challenge to hit your objective. And then as you make those decisions through the lens of your guiding policy, what are those coherent actions that ladder all the way back up, right? And then out of those actions, what are the key results that you expect from those coherent actions guided by the guiding policy that you've took? And how do you know that you're actually going to have overcome the challenge and hit your objective, right? So that's kind of the strategic lens that I look through that's very basic and applies to a lot of different situations. And within that, even if you're trying to make decisions constrained by a guiding policy, constrained by strategy, how do you choose which opportunities to pursue? And the question of opportunity cost comes up over and over again in my mind of if I say yes to this, in essence, I'm saying no to everything else that I could be doing. And that's really what it comes down to is, do we need something in the short term that produces revenue? Do we need something that's longer term? It's going to take longer to get to where we're not going to see the gains from it immediately, but the opportunity cost, right, is a lot higher if we don't pursue it because the upside of that thing that may take longer is actually the right thing to go do. But as product people, oftentimes we get so enamored by low-hanging fruit and quick wins that we get stuck in the cycle of just shipping every 2 weeks, little incremental innovations and optimizations. And we set ourselves up for potentially being disrupted as a company because in 2 week sprint cycles, you can't really accomplish anything great, right? It's incremental improvements over time. And I know there's the argument of, well, little improvements over time add up. Sure, that's probably true, but you're not going to do anything game changing or company changing or industry changing if you're just shipping little incremental things every 2 weeks. Okay. So sometimes those things are good and sometimes incremental improvements are the right decision. But if that's all you ever do, you might be missing out on bigger opportunities that take a lot more time to bake out, right? And that's where opportunity costs come in. So in my day job, I'm a director of product, right? I have a product line that I oversee, and we have to make trade-offs and decisions all the time. And this happened 3 months ago, right? In January, where we had opportunities and we were looking across the spectrum of my product line. And I wanted to go for something that would have shorter term upside while we paralleled with another team working on the thing that would take longer. But in the leadership discussion that we had, we decided that we needed to go all in on this longer term effort because the upside was just too high that we needed to double down on it, right? If we took twice as long to get there, then there's market risk. There's a lot of variables that go into why we should accelerate development on what we're working on, right? Sorry to be so cryptic, but try not to give too much away. So we intentionally said that we are not going to support a specific customer base for a specific period of time to give us the margin and the bandwidth to double down on the thing that had a higher opportunity, right? So the opportunity cost there is the cost that we're incurring is saying no to the short-term wins and some of those incremental improvements that we could have got, because the outcome, the expected outcome and reward, again, it is a hypothesis. We believe that by doubling down on this other opportunity, we're going to see, orders of magnitude greater outcomes from that decision, right? And we're not going to see anywhere near equally negative effects of ignoring the other opportunity for a time, right? And so that's where the conversation of opportunity cost comes in. Is it's really a question of strategy. Is what are we going to say no to, and what are we going to say yes to, and under what terms and conditions does that change or remain the same? What is the time horizon on this? What are the indicators of success, or what are the indicators that we should pivot, and being able to map those out and be clear about what cost are you willing to incur for what opportunity, and just being really intentional about that decision. Okay. So I've seen this play out a lot in my own career, but I got asked on Twitter as I was debating with a friend of mine about opportunity cost, whether, it's a economic theoretical thing or if it's something that could actually be applied in product management. And I thought it was interesting that the argument was, oh, that's an economics concept. And I kind of argued back, well, businesses are an economic venture, so we should have some type of economic rationale for our decision making, because at the end of the day, as product people, it comes down to revenue, what we do, right? In this ideological, customer obsessed state of mind, it's easy to get not blindsided, but it's easy to get enamored, I guess is the right word, with serving customers. And we should, right? We should exist to serve a customer and solve customer problems. But if we never make money, then how will we ever be in a economic position to continue serving their problems, right? So hear me out. If we serve a customer's problem completely well, right, and we have the perfect solution to a massive pain, but we run out of money and we can no longer support the product that solves the pain, and now the customer no longer has access to the product, did we do any good anyway? Or did we just leave another void for someone else to come solve? So at the end of the day, we have to make money for our business, whether it's through acquisition, activation, retention, and engagement, reducing churn. Like, it all comes down to how do we solve customer problems in a way that meets a business objective? Okay. So enough of my rant. I'm going to turn over to the NFL example that I mentioned a second ago, because I think it's like super compelling and pertinent, right? So if I'm an NFL GM, which is basically what I was asked to become by my friend on Twitter, of saying, like, if you were doing the NFL draft, how would you assess opportunity cost, right? I'm a big LSU guy, born and raised in Louisiana. So the NFL draft back in 2021, I was really excited to see where Jamar Chase would get drafted. And there was a big debate at the time, right? Should we get Jamar Chase? We already got, I believe T. Higgins was the year before, but they had some star receiver that was there before. They're like, okay, we have a good running back. We have a good receiver. Do we really need to go get a star receiver when Joe Burrow's getting sacked left and right? And so one side of the aisle was saying, oh, get Jamar, reunite the 2019 national champions together, the dynamic duo. And it sounded great. And another side of the aisle was saying, no, Go and get Penei Sewell. Sorry, from Sewell. I don't know if I'm saying his name correct. From Oregon as offensive tackle, because you need a high-end offensive tackle to protect Joe Burrow's blind side because he's worth way too much money. And that was the debate. Do we go get a flashy wide receiver to score touchdowns, or do we keep Joe Burrow off of his back? Right. And there was merit on both sides of the conversation. But if I put myself in the GM shoes, I'm looking at a couple different things. I'm looking at, wow, Jamar Chase would smoke some of the top corners across the country who are now playing in the NFL, who graduated a year before he did and are tearing it up as a DB in the NFL. Man, Jamar Chase is an instant impact player who could be a difference maker in us winning a championship, right? And the debate was, well, if Joe Burrow can't get the ball off in time, then it doesn't matter that you have Jamar Chase, right? So fair argument. But then the counter argument to Penei Sewell is saying, okay, he's a high-end offensive tackle in college, but he played at Oregon. Did he play against the top-end talent, right? Did he really, is he really that good? It's hard to always assess how good offensive linemen will do in the NFL, especially as a rookie, right? And so part of the decision calculus is, how long will it take him to transition from being a star in college to being able to truly take on those top-end defensive ends in the NFL? And that's an unknown, right? If you need to wait 2 or 3 years to get a return on Penei Sewell to grow up as a rookie into a veteran, so to speak, then you have to wait 3 years, right? That opportunity cost becomes clear, where I can see Jamar Chase as a receiver. That leap from college to pro is not as big for a receiver as it is for an offensive tackle. That's a fair argument too. So it's like, I could take the top end receiver and go get maybe a veteran to play offensive line, offensive tackle in the short term, who may not have the upside of Penei Sewell, but for the next 2 years, we could have Jamar Chase and someone at the same talent caliber, just because a veteran with more experience might be just as good as Penei Sewell with 1 or 2 years of experience, right? And so you have to measure all these variables. And yes, it is a hypothesis, but these are the kinds of conversations and questions you need to be asking as you try to weigh the opportunity cost of your decisions and trying to make the best trade-off for the best outcome as you try to balance short-term gains with long-term gains. And so, this is a fun hypothetical argument, but we could leverage some data to see in retrospect, how did it work out? And just so happens I have some stats, right? So Jamar Chase in 2021 had a Pro Football Focus grade of an 83.1, which is pretty good. It wasn't mind-blowing. It was third in receiving touchdowns in the NFL, which was pretty doggone good. Fourth in receiving yards. So yeah, he had a really, really good year as a rookie. Didn't have the most targets, didn't have the most receptions, and even still had pretty good receiving yards. So good yak, good yards after catch, and good touchdown numbers compared to the rest of the league, right? But if we look at Penei Sewell in his first year, his rookie year, right, a 77. So his Pro Football Focus grade, apples to apples, was a good bit lower, right? He also didn't play a ton of snaps. He was pretty low penalized, right? But he allowed a lot of sacks compared to other offensive tackles in the league, right? So if you look at year one comparison, yeah, Jamar Chase was the better option. And so let's look at what happened last year, right? So again, receiving touchdowns, tied for fourth, did pretty well. Overall grade, pretty good, still in the low 80s. Overall receiving yards, receptions, those things kind of, receptions actually went up a little bit. And then receiving yards dipped a good bit, but still had a 1,000-yard year. So really good season. And then Penei Sewell, you'll see in 2022. So if you're listening on podcast, sorry, go check out the YouTube channel, the Path to Product YouTube channel, and you'll get to see these stats. But you'll see that Penei's grade upped, still not quite apples to apples as good as Jamar. His sacks allowed went down quite a bit, so that's really good. Um, had more penalties, which is interesting. But still, the point is that Jamar Chase's impact over the first 2 years of his career quantifiably had more impact than Penei Sewell's. And again, there's other variables of he's playing for a different team and they play against different teams. And so it's not quite apples to apples. But if you can wade through that and just say, what impact have they had on their team in the league they play in the games that they've played? Jamar Chase has had a better impact on the Bengals than Penei Sewell has had on the Lions. Okay. So a fun example, if you don't like football, I'm sorry, but a good example of how opportunity cost in those discussions around trade-offs could happen in other contexts, but it's something that we should keep in mind as product people as we try to balance these short-term incremental improvements and optimizations with longer-term, potentially higher upside opportunities that may take longer to bake out and build, but might be the right thing for our business in the long term, right? So keep those things in mind as we're going about our decision-making frameworks and make sure that we're trying to weigh time horizons along with something like the RICE framework, where it's what is the reach, what is the impact, what is your confidence, and what is your effort, right? Reach and impact, confidence and effort, all those things will differ, but also make sure that you keep in mind the time horizon as another variable in that, because you may get different numbers if you're looking across a 2-week time horizon and a 2-month time horizon. And then when do you expect the outcomes of that prioritized opportunity to hit, and kind of project that out over time? It's no perfect science. It's just a variable to keep in mind as you're making decisions. So I hope this was helpful. I would really love your feedback on this whole concept of adding the opportunity cost variable into your decision-making framework. There should be in the show notes the ability to ask questions, a Q&A section. Feel free to drop those in there and I will respond to you, and probably respond with an episode to touch on what you've asked. So please do. Would love to hear what your thoughts are. And I will see you next week. But until then, thank you for joining me for another lesson in product management.